Do you ever see something and just... or is that just me? Well, that's exactly what happened when I saw these ribbon braces online a couple of months ago. And I started fantasising about how they'd be a perfect addition to that dark academia portion of my wardrobe. And then add on top of that, some of those sweet Edwardian history-bounding vibes. But they were well outside of my price range, so I figured, how hard could it be to try and make them myself? The first step in the right direction was to figure out how to make braces in the first place, and after a little hunting online, I stumbled across the work of Marc Davis. He's a fantastic Canadian maker and leather worker who shared an incredibly detailed step-by-step instructions on how to make leather braces on his blog. This was an excellent jumping off point for how to adapt the leather braces that he makes into the ribbon braces of my dreams. Marc's blog also helped me realise that even though the pieces of leather I'd need are small, it still required a lot of specialist equipment that I couldn't justify for such a small project, especially when the most experience I have with leather work is, well, this. So, rather than wasting money and ruining good leather, I decided to reach out with Marc directly, and he agreed to collaborate with me on this project. After a quick back and forth to discuss the design, he posted me the cut out bits of the leather ready to be assembled. Oh, hello. While you're here, I might as well tell you I'm not a professional maker. I'm self-taught and still learning, and as such it might make the more experienced of you cringe. If this might be you, consider yourself warmly welcomed, but also warned. Now, let's get you out of here, shall we? The very first step in the process was to dye the leather pieces black, and I was taking no risks, so I made sure to prepare the area with plenty of newspaper and an old chopping board. After rubbing pre-treatment in small circles to clean and prime the leather, the instructions said to use a paintbrush to paint the dye onto the sponge. I somehow managed to lose the sponge that came in the box, so I tried a few different techniques, but in the end I settled for smooshing the top layer on with a sponge and then using a paintbrush to get a smoother finish. I was just stitching everything together off camera just to give it a bit of a once over before I filmed it, and I realised that the leather dye was coming from everywhere I was holding it to keep it closed while I was stitching it shut. So I reached out to Marc again and he said, "Did you put sealant on?" I did not put sealant on. So I am going to fix the problem and then apply sealant to all the other pieces to stop it happening again. So let's go do that then. I applied the sealant in the same way as the dye, but I then buffed it out with a soft cloth and then left it to dry. While that's happening, let's crack on with the straps themselves. The pair I'm making today are being made from this beautiful jacquard ribbon and wool felt. While you could probably just use the ribbons as they are, the wool felt will protect the back of the ribbon from catching and from sweat. It will also make them a little bit more comfortable by padding them out. Felt is also great for this because it doesn't have a weave, so that means it doesn't need to be finished. I placed the ribbon on the felt, leaving a teeny tiny bit of felt showing to protect the edge of the ribbon, pinned it in place and very carefully cut the felt, leaving the same amount of space on the other side as well. Once it was all pinned down, I cut the ribbon just to be a little longer than the felt and then tucked it in between the ribbon and the felt so it was hidden away. I then stitched it down using a 1.5mm stitch and blind hemming foot used completely wrong to guide the needle as close to the edge of the ribbon as possible. Now, on the back there will be two small elastic straps to allow for movement between sitting and standing. To make these, I put on the trousers I was planning to wear with these braces and made a rough guess at how long they needed to be. Once that was done, I attached the hardware like so. The tri-glide is attached by folding the end of the ribbon around the centre bar and stitching it down. The other end will then be threaded through an oval ring, back up and woven into the tri-glide to make an adjustable strap. elastic straps, you just need to fold each end through an oval ring. I realised as I was making this that because I'll be folding it in half inside the leather connector for strength, I needed to make sure that the two folds go in opposite directions. And by the time that's all done, the sealant should be all dried, which means we can finally assemble it all together. The first task was to fold these longer ovals in half lengthways and stitch them down. For all the stitching on the leather, I'll be using the double needle technique. To do this, you start with one needle threaded on either side of a single piece of embroidery floss, and then push the needle through opposite holes. I then do 2 simultaneous ladder stitches by putting one needle in through the holes that the other just came out of, so that they crisscross and the needles end up on opposite sides to where they were. This creates extra strength, and it also means that if one thread wears down or frays, the other thread will still be there to keep it together until it can be fixed. I also use little blobs of hot glue to keep things in place while I stitch, being very careful not to cover any of the holes with the glue. While I'm putting this all together, why don't I tell you a little bit about the history of braces, or suspenders, whatever you prefer to call them. Though braces, or forms off, existed as a means of holding up one's breeches before, it wasn't until the 1820s when the fashionable waistline for trousers meant that they were above the natural waist, meaning they needed a little extra help to stay put. Suspenders were attached to buttons sewn into trousers as opposed to the clasps or spikes that you often see in modern styles. Braces became immensely popular very fast and remained a la mode all the way up to the First World War, and were often highly decorated. It was common for women to embroider suspenders for their husbands and sweethearts, but they were also made out of an endless combination of silk ribbons, wool, linen, leather and elastic, which makes them the perfect customisable addition to any history-bounder's wardrobe. Now, all that's left to do is attach the buttons to my trousers. Buttons for braces are slightly different as they're curved, so the hard edges that you see on shirt buttons won't dig in. I don't have any like that, so instead I'll be affixing these buttons on backwards so that the curved side is facing away from the fabric. The button should be placed on the front crease if it has one, and to the side seam or as close to it as you can manage. You also want to place another 2 buttons on either side of the back seam. Today when I was filming it was actually surprisingly gloomy, especially for early July, but I think it worked out quite well for trying to capture those mysterious dark academia vibes. I'm chuffed to bits with the final result. It's by no means perfect, but do you know what? I'm okay with that, because that's how we learn. The leather is super patchy in places where it's been rubbing against the different parts, but that's fine. I can go back and fix that later if I need to, and at least I know now how to put the sealant on properly to avoid that. At the end of filming, I actually managed to pop a button in the back of my trousers, which I'm thinking means that I need to put more elastic in the back next time I do it. I definitely need to shorten the straps a little bit so this hardware is sitting more here rather than on top of my shoulders, because it's really pretty and it'd be nice to see that. Like, what I have learned from this project. I'm excited to have developed the first little kernels of knowledge for the leatherworking skills that I'm hoping to grow over time, because things don't come straight away. Especially once I have the tools, space and time to really get into the nitty-gritty part of leatherworking. And not just the late stage parts of leatherwork that we did in this project with the dyeing and the stitching together, but it'll be really interesting to get into the actual cutting. That will come with time, and I'm in no rush to get to the end of that skill tree just yet. I'd like to thank Marc again for cutting the pieces and shipping them over to me from Canada. But on top of that, it was just really, really nice to be able to have someone who was experienced to chat to and get lots of tips and tricks. I don't think this project would have gone half as well if it wasn't for our constant conversations going through the whole process here and there. You should really go and check out his blog and his Instagram. I've put the links down below, along with links to all the materials that I've used in this project as well. Now, all that's left to say is thank you to you for coming along on this little sewing adventure. I am too much of a commitment phobe to tell you exactly when the next video is coming out, but it will be soon. And if you're anything like me and incredibly impatient, you can always check out my Instagram as well, which is down below, just to see how my next project is going along, or just to stop in and have a little chat. But for now, it's goodbye, and I hope you have a magical day. Until next time. Well, I decided, well, no worries, go for it. But they were tragically outside of my, but they were well outside of my price range, so I'm recording. No, I said all done. Job done.